Good evening. Thank you for coming to what I think is going to be an important and timely discussion of whether preservation is hampering housing production in the city. I'm Peg Breen, president of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. We were heartened by the interest in tonight's program, so we are also taping it, and we'll have it out shortly. A great thanks to Frank Siami for helping to underwrite this evening, as well as the Joyce Matz Fund at the New York Community Trust and Sam Turvey. When the Landmarks Law was signed in 1965, opponents warned that preservation was going to freeze the city and coat it in amber. They were very obviously wrong. The claim today is that historic districts are limiting housing production. Housing is a very important issue for the city, but we believe preservation has an important role to play in saving and creating housing. So we've brought together an impressive panel to discuss the issue. Gale Brewer began representing the 6th Council District on the Upper West Side, on Manhattan's Upper West Side, in 2002. She went on to serve 2 terms as borough president, returning to the council in 2022. She's always been a great advocate for preservation and affordable housing. Donovan Rypkema is the founder and head of PlaceEconomics in Washington, D.C. He has studied the impact of preservation on cities throughout the country and the world. He did 2 reports for the Landmarks Conservancy on the economic benefits of preservation here in New York. Margery Perlmutter founded and leads Urban Factors, a land use consulting company. She's been a member of the city's Landmarks Preservation Commission, and she was head of the Bureau of Standards and Appeals. She's an architect and an attorney. Maggie Poxon is a longtime affordable housing developer. She is now a principal at Fish Plate Development, building affordable and supportive housing. Earlier in her career, she was senior project manager for the Doe Fund, creating supportive permanent housing for the homeless. Alex Gorlin is an award-winning architect. He designs affordable housing in addition to his high-end work. Alex is also a noted architectural critic and scholar. Recently, he co-edited a book on the national housing crisis. We're very grateful for their participation this evening. We'll begin with Councilmember Brewer. Gale?
Thank you very much, Peg Breen. I am a fan of Landmarks Conservancy, Peg Breen, and the amazing staff, so thank you. And this panel is way beyond my ability, so I'll do the best I can, but what an esteemed group of people. So I am a diehard preservationist, so when I hear that affordable housing advocates, I'm one of them, are pitted against those who support preservation, it's very discouraging and not true. And I am living in the historic district of the Upper West Side. We bought a brownstone years ago. It was always single family. So I did not convert it, which some people do, from delivered vacant, which is what the brokers say, to a family, one family. Some people do that. And it is, in some cases, discouraging, although I understand it's going to happen. In addition, what is discouraging, and I can give you at least 4 or 5 examples, is when you have rent-stabilized, low-rise, be it historic district or very near historic district, low-rise brownstones or townhouses with fully occupied every single rent-regulated or even market. And then what usually happens, at least in my area, is people get bought out. And, you know, I understand. There was a woman who had 2 brownstones on 96 and West End Avenue, and now it's, with all due respect, a very ugly condo, glass, and, you know, she wanted to retire, and this is the way she did it. I think we have to think much more carefully about how we keep historic and keep the owners able to finance and retain their rent-regulated tenants. Another example was 15 West 96th Street. There were all brownstones there. Everybody was bought out. And then now we have a very tall, ugly building in its stead, 100% condos. At 86 of West End Avenue was all brownstones, rent regulated. Everybody was bought out quickly, almost overnight. And now we have a very large condo building. The list goes on. I have about 10 of them here. And the challenge is, I think, as people who care desperately about the fact that so much, as all of the studies of Landmarks Conservancy shows, like 5% of the whole city is historic district. It's not a lot. We need to retain what we have. I can't tell you, this is such a false narrative, because when you have a historic district, you have jobs, you have tourism, you have rent-regulated apartments, and although owners don't like this, rent regulation, according to 2019, continues. So there would be an ongoing affordable unit. I'm a big fan, too, of Landmarks West, and they just worked with George James to look at the Upper West Side in terms of how many rent-regulated units have left. It's thousands. And what has replaced it is condo housing. So I think as we go forward, we all have to think of how to retain the historic districts, in my opinion, increase the number of historic districts, but stop this really false idea that you're putting one against the other. We need 500,000 units of affordable housing. And to the credit of the mayor, he went down. Maybe he'll get the president to agree to build 12,000, for instance, at Sunnyside on the platform. That's an example of thinking ahead, thinking about affordable housing, not destroying historic districts. So I'm just here, like everybody else, to say that it is wrong to pit one group against another. I think there's plenty of, I can give you so many examples where even during the Hudson Yards, there was opportunity to build on NYCHA on a parking lot. We still haven't done it. 124 units could be built. The speaker has some ideas about how to do it over libraries. Lots of places that affordable housing, public land in particular, could be built, but not put it to destroy historic districts. Thank you very much.
And now economist Donovan Rypkema.
Well, I'm not here to argue with anybody, and I'm not a New Yorker, so it's not my thing. I'm just here to kind of give you some facts about all of this. Fact one is density is important. It's important for delivery of public services. It's important for lots of environmental reasons. And in the case of New York City, it is not like any other place. The population is growing. The city's landlocked, so at least the argument goes, then we have to go up. So that's fact one. Fact two, in fact, it is the historic districts that are already today providing the density in New York City. In every one of the 5 boroughs, the densest neighborhoods are the local historic districts. When we did one of the studies for PEG, we looked at Manhattan. And in the non-historic residential neighborhoods in Manhattan, the density is about 80,000 people per square mile. That's very dense. Then we looked at the new residential towers, and yeah, they added density, all right, up to 104,000. But here's what's missed, that the historic districts in Manhattan have 144,000 people per square mile. So if you want density, then historic districts are where density comes from. Fact three, and the councilwoman just mentioned it, less than 5% of the city's land area comes under the purview of the Landmarks Commission. So if you can't, as a developer, if you can't figure out how to add density in the other 95%, maybe you're not smart enough to be a developer in New York City. And then we looked at the density in all the historic districts in all 5 boroughs, and 93% of all the historic districts, in fact, have a density greater than the average of residential areas in the city, and that's true in all 5 boroughs. And if you look at the low-density areas in New York, 1% of the low-density areas are in historic district. 99% are low-density areas, in fact, are not historic districts. So what has happened is that historic districts have become this target of convenience by the parasite buildings who want to use them but want to destroy them at the same time. Then we have this thing about filtering. Now, it used to be called trickle-down, and I guess that wasn't politically correct, so they changed it to filtering. And it's, at least for the city of New York, it is a false equation. And here's why. Here's the theory, is that it's based on the law of supply and demand. If supply increases and demand remains constant, then prices will fall. Premise one. Number two, the theory says that if a new unit added to the market at the top end, there will be movement upwards in the housing opening up a unit at the bottom end of the market. And the third assumption is that since the supply has increased, the unit at the bottom will be less expensive. That's the theory. It doesn't work. It's a broken promise, the trickle-down theory. It doesn't work. And here's what has to be true in order for filtering work. First of all, this theory assumes that an increased demand at a rate no greater than the number of new units being created. And that doesn't work when there's an excess of unmet demand. Number two, for it to work, the theory assumes that upward movement is within the city. That doesn't work if much of the demand comes from outside the city. When a wealthy buyer from Germany or from Miami comes up, that doesn't fit the filtering model. Number three, the theory assumes that as I move up, I'm exchanging one residence for another. The theory doesn't work when when the residence I purchase is the second or the third or the fourth one that I own. And when additions to the housing stock are at the top of the market, the theory only works if the in-migration is all at the bottom of the market. And finally, the theory assumes that the inventory at the bottom of the market remains in place, and that doesn't work if you're wiping out that bottom of the market housing stock. The fact five is the central element, and New York is particularly crisis-driven, but this housing crisis is around the country. Every place has it. And the central element of any strategy for affordable housing has to be NOAHs, the naturally occurring affordable housing. Well, the fact is there is no such thing as a new NOAH. There is no such thing, meaning if we're going to have affordable housing, we have to keep what's there. Thanks very much.
Margery Perlmutter. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks very much, Peg, for the invitation. Nice to meet everybody who I haven't met before. Okay, so some reality about this presentation is it's repetitious. So Councilmember Brewer raised the discussion already, and that was then picked up again. So I will start with the question that I really want to ask. So the opposition to historic districts is that historic districts are preventing the creation of affordable housing in general, but my focus is on affordable housing. I think it's the wrong question. I think is the absence of regulatory controls like historic preservation and other types of regulatory programs preventing the continuation of affordable housing? And the answer is decidedly yes. So if we look at, as to point down and now to visualize some of the projects that the council member referred to, on 3rd Avenue and 2nd Avenue, on one single block, 83rd Street, were demolished 15 tenement buildings, tenement-like buildings, and on each of the slides you'll see the before and then the after in the lower right. So in each of these, so I'll show you each. So that whole row of tenement buildings replaced by this tower, and then I'll go through. All of these tenement buildings replaced by that one tower. There were 15 tenement buildings with 72 modestly priced apartments in the 90% to 130% of area median income range. So some of them were rent stabilized, and some of them are just moderately priced because that's what exists inside of these small buildings. The new buildings that were built, a 32-story at 11 FAR, with 128 units, 33 units of which were rent stabilized, having received a tax incentive. 9 of those received additional floor area under what's known as the Voluntary Inclusionary Housing Program. The next one, 22 stories built at 12 FAR. 5 of the 70 units in the building are affordable. And the next one was built at 12 FAR with 86 units, entirely condominiums. So when we do the math on the affordability in these units, they're much more expensive because that's the way the affordability program works. It's much more expensive than what exists presently. But what it resulted in is a 52% decrease in the number of units that low and moderate income families can afford. And so now just a little more of a tour down the avenue where you see more and more, and I didn't do a tabulation on how many affordable units were destroyed and how many units in each one, but I can tell you that if you want. This is my favorite one. This is a completely wacky situation. You have all of those tenement buildings destroyed, and you have one holdout in the middle, not clear. And then these 2 developers got together to cantilever each one over the building. It is, and then I don't show it, but it wraps around the corner because it's not bad enough the way it is. And that's what we have now. Then I move on to the reality that there are many examples of individual landmarks and landmarks in historic and buildings in historic districts that have rent-regulated apartments, so that are still affordable. And my Manhattan house is a very famous one. That's the one on the upper left of the slide. And then Park Avenue is one of my favorite examples because famously, when rent regulations were being sort of confronted, Sheldon Silver famously had some best friends who lived on Park Avenue, and they earned over $1 million, but they didn't pay anywhere close to $2,500 a month for an apartment, so they got to stay in their affordable unit. Not everyone who lives on Park Avenue has that kind of combination, but it's what made it famous. And then, very importantly, the City and Suburban Homes is another, that's on 64th and 65th Street. And here, so here's some great examples on Park Avenue of rent-stabilized housing on Park Avenue in a historic district. This is the Upper East Side Historic District. And on the left of your screen, you'll see from the top City and Suburban Homes, which is an individual landmark. And right across the street is a building that, when there was a big debate about allowing demolition of this individual landmark, one of the arguments was that you could transfer the development rights over to this other site across the street. And the Stahl organization that owns the City and Suburban building said, impossible. The building is filled with rent-stabilized tenants. Exactly 10 years later, there's a demolition permit out for that building across the street, and they evicted all of the rent-stabilized tenants. So these are real-life examples, not that we can really talk about. And another example of this, which has to do with the density that was spoken about, this is the Lower East Side Historic District filled with tenement buildings with the density that we're talking about, all of them moderately and even low-priced affordable units. And then we can talk about famous versions of conversions of large historic buildings, individual historic buildings like Westbeth, into affordable apartments, in the case for artists. And in combination with housing preservation development regulatory agreements, Westbeth is now committed to retain affordability until the year 2049. So in combination with historic preservation and HPD regulatory agreements, you have effectively a permanent affordable housing condition. And so this is Westbeth, how glorious it is for affordability. And then this is a really great project, PS 109, that was converted to affordable housing for artists. an individual landmark. And then I'm just going to go quickly through. This Landmarks Commission also, of course, does permit demolition of buildings in historic districts, so it's a stupid claim that anybody might make. If the building is viewed as not contributing to the character of the historic district, it can be removed. So this is a project at 985 Fifth that was just approved by the commission to demolish this 1970s tower and replace it by actually a Robert Stern project. And of course, it's luxury units. So that's part of the question, is why is it luxury units? It's because the market wants luxury units. The developers want to build the luxury units. How do we shift their interest from that market to affordability market? That's actually a question, and that's something that and by the way, it's a reduction you see in the number of units, 46 to 26 luxury. And then here's some other examples in Soho, for example, of buildings that were allowed to be demolished and replaced with new construction. So I'll just go fast because I know I'm taking too much time. Okay, so anyway, those are ones. And then I have plenty of other discussions to talk about, but I won't. I just want to point out that in 2014, the historian Gregory Dietrich wrote an entire study on this very same subject. So the subject has been coming up year after year, decade after decade, so it's not new, and we'll go on and on and on. Okay.
Maggie Poxon.
Good evening. So I've been developing affordable and supportive housing in New York City for 30 years, mostly new construction on vacant land. But the last 8 years have been immersed in historic preservation projects. I oversaw the adaptive reuse of this building. It's a 1938, it's called the Triborough Hospital for Tuberculosis. We call it the T building. It's in Jamaica, Queens. It's one of the largest and rarest examples of modern architecture in New York City. We turned it into 200 apartments for low and moderate income households, including 75 units of supportive housing for homeless individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. The basement, it's a huge building, 240,000 square feet. So the basement also has a community center. We have artist studios and some office space. I'm currently consulting on a project called 3 Arts Club. It's located on West 85th Street. It's within the Riverside West End Historic District. That project, that building was built in 1927 as a rooming house for women coming to New York City wanting to make it big in the 3 arts. So that's music, fine arts, and theater. The owner of the property of the 3 Arts project is the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing. And we're working to convert this, it's the original 124 small private SRO rooms, into 61 apartments for low-income seniors and formerly homeless seniors. So to develop anything, I feel you need to be able to tell the story. And in my experience, the historic preservation element helps us tell the story. It helped us in both of these examples tell the story of preservation and helped us unlock the money. So for the T building, we were bringing low-income and homeless people into a stable working-class neighborhood. It faced opposition, as homeless housing almost inevitably does. And so when we stepped into it, the community was galvanized against us. They wanted to demolish it. But preservation helped us get it over the finish line. The preservationists in the local community, 4 very strong women, persuaded the community board, and we saved the property. Uniquely, the T building is overbuilt under current zoning, so that also helped us make a very strong economic argument that demolishing was not the right way to go. We got it listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which made it eligible for the historic tax credits. That brought 20% of the $111 million development cost from the federal government and the state into the city. That saved the city, obviously, huge subsidy money. The historic tax credit has been the biggest new tool for affordable housing in the last few years. So that's the T building, that's our lobby, that's the original hallway that we had to retain. That's a 10-foot wide hallway. We thought, we'll make it 5 feet. And they said, no, it has to be 10. And so we had to come up with some creative ways to mimic the historic hospital ward. Now, and that's one of the apartments. So the Three Arts Club is in a historic district. The T building was not in a landmarks district. And its use has not changed significantly over the years. It's always been housing. Most recently, it was used as a COVID-era pandemic shelter, which you can imagine the neighborhood was not thrilled. They're not thrilled about those transient uses. So turning it back into senior housing was a positive continuation of the building's story and was more accepted by the community. So it's just, there's the women working on their arts. So as everyone has been saying here, building affordable housing is challenging, but it's the amount of government subsidy we need. Low-income housing tax credits, tax-exempt bonds, no-interest mortgages, rental subsidies, real estate tax abatements. Putting together these spreadsheets and trying to pencil this out is incredibly complex. So Three Arts also was able to harness the historic tax credit, and that made a huge difference. Again, $11 million the city didn't have to spend, but they still had a gap. And so the owners, West Side Federation, opted to go very hard on energy efficiency because that was able to help them bridge the gap. So historic properties are actually exempt from New York City Energy Code, so they didn't have to, but it will now be the rare New York City landmark that is Passive House certified, and that again helps to tell the story of this beautiful historic building. Passive House adds complications. I would call it hellish. One example is finding windows. So we have to find a window that meets the thermal efficiency of the Passive House regulations. It has to meet EDA requirements, and then we have LPC sightlines to, and all of that together. There was only one manufacturer we could find that would actually work. So that they didn't shop drawings, they couldn't deliver in time. It was going to be a major problem. LPC worked with us. We came up with a Solomonic solution. Secondary facades were exempt. We found a different manufacturer, and we were able to move forward. Historic authenticity retained, and the story will be able to be told. In general, this is my screed about how hard affordable housing has become in 30 years. Developing housing in New York City and everywhere has been very incredible headwinds that I've never seen. High interest rates, high insurance, construction costs. But on top of that, there are local forces trying to make affordable housing do even more. They're asking us to be more energy efficient than the building next door. We have to embody all of our carbon, where they want us to have more stringent environmental reviews, 100% climate resiliency. These are all incredibly positive and laudable goals, but they are definitely getting in the way of us building and delivering housing on time and efficiently. We seem to have lost the storyline of what we need to do. There are tens of thousands of people in our shelters. We have to rebalance and we have to get them out. And so I would hope, and my goal is to help advocate in the city, to adjust our demands of what affordable housing should do and focus more on what it must do. And in my experience, you don't have to sacrifice aesthetics, neighborhood character, environmental safety, or energy efficiency. We just need to reform our regulations and financial requirements and fully staff our government agencies. We need a rational and predictable process that moves faster, yet having functioning government backstops. LPC works very well, in my opinion, like DOB, like DEP. If they're properly staffed and have rational regulatory goals, they can become part of the solution. So I would like my goal for affordable housing and the goals of the city moving forward be to reduce the risk and the cost of developing affordable housing. We'd have more flexibility and more options to adapt and react to local needs, and then we'd be able to enter communities and historic districts and have a more balanced dialogue, and hopefully be able to tell a story of housing development that communities would be willing to take and hear. Thank you.
And Alex Gorlin.
Thank you very much. And all of these issues are most important that have been raised, and my talk is a little bit more broad. But I thought we would give an overview showing how housing and preservation has never been incompatible. In fact, historically, it's been the means of saving monuments from the past, most notably in, as an example, in Rome, where actually I was just there last week, so I can reconfirm that these are still around. This is the Theater of Marcellus from ancient times, and it was used as a quarry during the Renaissance, but it was finally saved by Peruzzi, who built the Palazzo Orsini on top of it. And so, a palace is still housing, and it's... and in fact, it was partly buried, and it's been uncovered so that more sections of it are available. And the Colosseum in Rome, also used as a quarry. In fact, it gave rise to the phrase, what the barbarians didn't destroy, the Barberini did. So that St. Peter's, for example, and many of the Renaissance churches were built from the travertine quarried from the Colosseum itself. However, a recent article in Smithsonian showed that for 500 years, from the year 800 through 1300, the lower arcades were used as housing for a nearby monastery. So, and then a bit more kind of less specific, but the Stadium of Domitian was intact basically until the 1300s, and then slowly it was used to create housing on the foundations, so that and yet the Piazza Navona maintains the basic plan of the stadium. So all of these are different, I would call, strategies through historic example of preservation. Especially in a place that didn't have any laws until fairly recently. In fact, as Paul Goldberger showed, in the 1920s, Mussolini tore down many parts of the city to free the monuments, but taking away and also destroying housing in the interim. This is not Rome, but 13th Street. This is the 13th Street Presbyterian Church from the Greek Revival, 1846. And the facade is preserved, but in 1975, and it was a controversial case, it was turned into condominiums. However, the facade still provides this kind of surprise on an otherwise historic street with low-scale townhouses. And then examples of preservation and housing, especially the lowest income housing for homeless, was started by Roseanne Haggerty, the MacArthur Foundation fellow who founded Common Ground, whose mission was to solve homelessness through the idea of supportive housing. So supportive housing has social services on the ground floor, psychologists, caseworkers. I always compare it, especially in this group, I can say, is like Park Avenue, where you have your psychiatrist, you have a plastic surgeon. So it's social services for all economic levels. So this is the Prince George Hotel from 1905, and it's totally preserved on the facade, and the interior, the ballroom was preserved, but it's turned into individual units for formerly homeless. Another example, which few people remember, is that even today there's the Women's Mental Health Shelter in the Armory on Park Avenue. So while TAFAF and all these million-dollar art fairs are going on, there are in fact homeless women living on the upper floors. Now, I mean, an example, it shows how they're not incompatible in the same building. Now, in my own work as an architect, this was the renovation of the Griffith Building in Port Richmond in Staten Island, and it's from 1874, and it's actually on the site where Aaron Burr died in another hotel eventually after his duel killing Alexander Hamilton. And he died penniless and poor, partly because he didn't have social services. So, Anyway, so we renovated as far as we could with a rock bottom budget, but one of the wonderful things we did was to open up, it's 36 units of housing, but open up the ceilings inside, which had been dropped to half of this height. So these are now 14-foot high ceilings with the arches for formerly homeless individuals. Now, I have a few more examples. Actually, I'm glad you talked about NOAA, the naturally occurring affordable housing, as something that is not built, because in fact a lot is built now. And as the T-building person showed, that is a great example. And I have 3 brief examples I'll show. This is, this is the site opposite the housing that we did, which is the great Franklin Avenue Armory from 1911. And it's at the opposite side of the block to what we did for communal life, it faces the armory, and I chose, instead of to imitate or build it out of brick, to do something in contrast as a complement to enhance both buildings. It won the National AIA Award last year, and Justin Davidson, in talking about housing in the last 10 years in the city, said it exudes a salsa vibe in a Corbusian frame, which which actually is accurate, because the charge from the nonprofit Communal Life, it serves the local Puerto Rican and Latin community, and the director said, I want this building to have a Latin flair. Now, what that means required a lot of, in the end it was certain colors. I used the design from Walter Burley Marx of the Rio Beach at the bottom. And it's a cheerful, bright building in a very drab neighborhood, although opposite is the Great Armory. And in the lobby, I used the colors of the flags of Latin America to create a bright core, for the elevators, which oddly enough anticipated the halftime show from Bad Bunny. Because, as you remember, there was a procession at the very end of Latin American flags. So I don't know if he saw this building, but, I will. And the mural is actually part of a 100-foot mural that goes down that hall by a local 2 artists who illustrated a poem of the major Puerto Rican poet. And this is the inside. The windows are large and bright, faces the armory. So a preservation is part of the experience from the interior visually. And then this is a site in the South Bronx that we built on. This is the Charlotte Street in the South Bronx, which was where Jimmy Carter, the president from 1977, visited. The Bronx was burning. Large swaths of the Bronx had been abandoned. And this is a photo that I actually took during a Robert Stern studio called South Bronx Suburbia at Yale in 1978, the year after. And so you see it's a complete disaster, and buildings had been abandoned. So on this site, we built for another nonprofit, New Destiny, whose mission is to provide housing for women who are survivors of domestic violence. And so this provides 50 units. I just show part of it, the open loggia porch that's inviting, and at the same time the brick angle to create a kind of defensive skin so the women feel more secure, but softened by the pastel colors of the perforated air conditioning screens. And this is one of the apartments inside, which is as good as any market rate housing, but this is for formerly homeless women. And last 2 this is another on Boston Road in the Bronx for Breaking Ground, the successor organization for Common Ground. And here the historic reference is more associative. It's on the site of the original farm of Lewis Morris, who signed the Declaration of Independence and offered his 3,000-acre farm to the new country to become the capital of the United States. this is a real estate deal that didn't work out. So it's now the South Bronx. This is the lobby that reflects the former topography. And then, as Gale Brewer said, it's a totally false argument to scapegoat landmarks. And I use it as example. This is the Bronx First community group organized by the Metro IAF, a community organizing group. They were one of Obama's teachers. And this is a 3,000-person gathering, the first gathering in which this community group takes power to look for sites to build affordable housing. And they charged myself and my office to find sites in the Bronx. And so we scoured satellite maps, and the preliminary discovery was 22 sites, empty sites, owned by the city. And as you know, every mayor for the last 15 years has promised to show an inventory of these empty sites, and nothing has been shown. And, we found all these sites. This is, they're city sites or sites that are the city can deal with. This is the intersection of 3 Metro North tracks, empty. And you can build 900,000 square feet of housing on this empty site that actually is accessible from 2 sides. And we did massing and zoning studies, this is one of them, to create 2,000 units of housing. And in blue, up on the upper part, is another site we worked on for the same community group. We designed the Mott Haven School campus, also on an empty site. So community groups can take power, find sites, and don't have to pick on landmarks. So, thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, there is a lot to be done. Preservation has a role to play, and I think we have to keep discussions like this and stop incentivizing market rate developers and put the focus on the people who actually want to build affordable housing. So I hope you come away with an appreciation of how preservation can help and why preservation should not be picked on for this. And there should be more historic districts. The city created historic districts because the government at the time realized they were important to the city's economy, identity, and quality of life, and they still are today. And I'd just like to finish before we go to our reception, where I hope you'll join us, because there's a wonderful quote by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, and this is when she was trying to save Grand Central, but she cared a lot about the future of the city and architecture. And so she said in part, "Is it not cruel to let our city die by degrees, stripped of all her proud monuments, until there is nothing left of its history and beauty to inspire our children? If our children are not inspired by the past of our city, where will they get the strength to fight for her future?" Well, here we all are, and we all need to fight for New York. So thank you very much for coming. Please join us outside.